Hello everybody and welcome back to part 20 of the Flower Class build. This is the Revell 144 scale kit. This week I'm just going to be doing a short video. You might be able to tell from the sound of my voice that I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, and I'm not going to be doing too much, especially with painting and airbrushing and so on. I don't want to be making the cold any worse. But I'm going to do a little bit and make a little bit of progress. I'm hoping to get the mast built today and the radar tower. I'm not sure how I'm going to approach the radar tower. It does have some glazing in it, and I'm not sure how I'm going to achieve that. But we'll see how we get on. We'll get the parts out and see how it comes together. So starting with this radar lantern. We're on page 4 of the Pontos instructions here. I've already built the lower base and the platform for this, but I now want to go on to the lantern itself, which is built from some Revell parts, some plastic parts from the kit, and this surround here. And this is the bit that I'm going to need to work out how to glaze it. We've also got the actual radar inside, so we'll get those plastic parts out of the Revell kit first and make a start with that. Whilst I've got the sprue out, I'll also take the radar itself, the Revell plastic radar, and we just need the base from that. Revell provide a transparent part to fill the gap between the roof, if you like, and the base of this lantern. But we'll be using some Pontos etched brass to replicate those frames a bit more accurately. All we need is the pedestal for this, so just snip that off. Some of these Revell parts are really quite rough. I think I've mentioned before that the quality of the kit is given away a little bit by some of these parts. But this particular part will be hidden a little bit behind the glazing, so we're not too bothered about that. Sorry about the pheasant in the background. He's getting in a flap about something. These are the Revell parts all cleaned up and ready for the etch. So this part forms the windows, if you like, and that needs to be formed around this hexagonal shape. I think I'll end up soldering the two ends together just for some strength on this part, so I'm just guessing at these angles at the moment. Just do by eye. So I'm just adjusting these angles now, again by eye, just to form that hexagon. So it's pretty close. So at this stage I'll solder this from the inside, but the first thing I want to do is just to tape this up around the outside, just to close that brass up a little bit. This is a delicate piece of brass, so we want to be gentle with it. Don't pull it about too much. I've actually forgotten where the join is there. It's a good sign that I could hardly see it, because at least it shows that the join's nice and tight. So just get some solder into that join. So I do hope I've got the right one there. We'll find out when I take the tape off. If it falls apart, I'll know that I've missed it. Nope, that's all good. I think I might be able to get some crystal clear into these openings. I think the gaps are small enough to accept crystal clear. If they get over a certain width, then the crystal clear just won't grip to the outside. I think they're probably just about on the limit of what's possible with crystal clear. This is a test of the hexagon shape, and it's about there actually. I'm reasonably happy with that. So I'm just going to tack that into place on the base with a bit of medium super glue, and then once it's in position I can lock it a bit more with some extra thin. And that's about as good as I'm going to get it. It's fairly equal all the way around. I'm just debating whether to leave the roof off, because if the crystal clear doesn't work, I'm going to have to get some acetate in there, in which case it'll be difficult with the roof on. On the other hand, it will be easier to get all this painted, get a nice finish on it, and then apply the crystal clear at the end. I think I'm going to take a chance and put the roof on and hope that the crystal clear works. That's worked pretty well. I'm fairly happy with that. I have a couple of little vents, I think they are, that go on the top. They're from the Revell kit. Getting the flash off these is pretty time consuming really. There's a sprue gate at the top of those, but I'm going to get them set up, and I'll just clean that sprue gate off the top once these have dried. I think it'll just be easier doing it like that. Okay, so I'll just leave that to dry and we'll do the radar itself. This strip here needs to be curved to match the profile of these two ends. And to do that, I'm just going to soften this brass up a little bit. I'll just anneal it, and it'll just enable us to form that a little bit easier. So if I just bend the sides up, or rather the top and bottom, and then I can use that shape to try and work out the profile. So we'll see how that does. We're not far off with that. No, that's... I think I was lucky there. Well, that's gone together. That's good. We have a dividing plate here which goes in the centre. Hopefully that should slot in the middle. Drops in like that. Just put the radar on the pedestal now. Those are the lantern and the radar. They're ready for some primer, paint, and then we'll see if we can sort those glazing panels out. This is the mast assembly, which is entirely from Pontos. I don't think we've got any Revell plastic in this assembly. So there's quite a bit to do with this. I think the most difficult thing will be building this tub. I'm not sure whether it would be described as a crow's nest, but something similar. It's a lookout anyway. So I think that's the first thing that I'll do to try and get that shaped. It's going to be quite a challenge to get that together and soldered up. So let's try and get that out of the way. So again, I just want to anneal this brass. And it's going to need to be rolled to try and get the cylinder shape. So I'll just do that on this soft surface. This is just an old polishing sponge. And I just gently want to roll this up and try and follow the curve. See, it's quite a difficult shape to bring together. You really do need to anneal this, because otherwise it'll just spring too much and you'll never get it to hold together or to be able to shape it properly. I'll be able to just refine that circle once we've got the join sealed up at the back here. Okay, I think that's pretty much there. And it's pretty solid. There's quite a bit of solder in there, so I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Now we can go back and do the rolling again. So that's nice and round now. Now apparently this fits on the underside. So I think the thing to do with this disc for the base is to tin it. That is to say, apply a thin layer of solder all the way across the inside, fit it to the tub that we've just made, and heat it up, and it should all melt together, the solder, because we've already got some inside the tub. So we'll see how that goes, see if that works. It's going to be one of those days when the countryside is noisier than you would imagine. You can hear in the background the local farmers felled some trees, or rather they've blown down in the storms that we've had over the last 2 or 3 weeks really. So there's lots of firewood around, and the local farmers taking advantage of that. So we've got the sound of the chainsaw, unfortunately, in the back of the video. So living in the countryside is great, but it's not as quiet as you would think. Next we've got to fit this, which I suppose is a lip. I think it's probably a wind deflector. And again, we need to anneal that part just to enable it to be formed. Again, this is a bit of trial and error to get this to the right sort of shape. That's pretty much how I want it. It's a very awkward shape to judge. Again, we'll be able to make little adjustments to that once we've got some solder on it. So I've just managed to tack that in place in 3 places. Just use a round brush handle to just refine the shape of that lip. So that's quite a tricky part to assemble. The various curves and circles on it make it quite difficult to shape, but that's a big improvement on the Revell part, and probably the most difficult part of the mast assembly, so it's good to get that one out of the way. These are the parts for the mast, so the lower portion, the top mast and the yard. And there are quite a number of attachments, brackets and so on to fit to these mast parts. And we're just going to have to be careful to assemble them in order. The brass turning is stepped, so when we put these parts on, they will fall down to the correct position because of the steps provided in the Pontos turning. So it is important to get these in a sequential order, because if we put one of the higher brackets on, this one wouldn't slide down because of the taper on the top mast. So just a bit of care needed to make sure we don't lock ourselves out. The important thing with these as well is to make sure that they're all facing forward, or in the correct direction anyway. So when viewed from above, they all want to be in a straight line, facing straight ahead. The platform that I've just fitted here is the support for the, I'm going to call it a crow's nest, that we've just built. That sits on top. I need to be careful with this piece because it has some holes for rigging on it, and I don't want to block those holes up. This is the yard bracket. So we have two rings bending in one way that goes down over the mast, and two rings bent forward which the yard slides through. Like that. So just get that bracket in the middle of the yard. The yard has some blocks on it for the rig, but I'm going to attach it to the mast first. I don't want to be handling this too much with all the blocks on it. So again, the stops on the mast, bring that to the correct position. Actually, I'm not going to be able to do that, I don't think, because we've got some lifts which attach to the top and round the end, and I think I'm going to have to put those on first, and before I put those on I've got to put the blocks on, so that idea isn't going to work. I'll have to build this yard in its entirety and then drop it onto the top mast. These are the blocks. Each one has to be folded through 180 degrees just to double the thickness. I'm going to isolate the rest of the part because it's very fine brass and it will twist if I'm not careful, so just lock the rest in position. And the loops on top twist through 90 degrees just so they can go over the yard. So thread that onto the yard. And there's one either side, so just repeat that process. Bend each block in turn. This small bracket here attaches the top of the ladder to the upper mast. Ladder bracket needs to be attached in between the yard bracket and the lift bracket at the top. So the first thing to do is to position the yard on the mast. like that. Then the ladder bracket, and then finally the lift bracket at the top. Bring those square. Making sure that everything is facing ahead. Just turn the yard round and then just lock it in place with some extra thin super glue. Get it nice and tight down into its position. So that's the top mast. That can now be attached to the lower part of the mast here. We've again got some brackets to squeeze in before we do that though. So we'll attach the two masts together. That's the two halves of the mast, if you like, together. These rings will fit on later when we come to attach the mast to the deck. They're just finishing rings. They'll drop down onto the deck just to close the gap between the mast base and the deck itself. So I'll just put those to one side safely. Finally, we've got this small part here which I think is just a tiny gaff. It's certainly angled like a gaff, so I'll have to check the rigging diagram when we get to that stage. And that goes right on the top of the mast. Again, making sure that we get all these orientated correctly. And then finally we have the mast cap. Can fit the lookout now. This last part is a lamp, I think, of some sort. It's a pretty awkward shape to fold up, actually. The lamp fits on this little bracket underneath the lookout. So that's the mast finished. I'll fit that in the next episode because I've still got some work to do to rig this. I'm going to pre-rig it rather than try and thread pieces of rigging line. Whilst this is actually on the model, I'll pre-install the halyards up here onto these blocks and the other pieces of stays further down the mast, and get that ready to actually ship onto the model. So that's the mast as far as I can take it. The radar tower is ready to paint as well when I come to do the mast. The last thing I want to do for this episode is to prepare the galley flue, which is a Revell part, but it just wants a bit of refinement before we can use it on the model. This is the Revell flue. It's a solid item and I want to drill it out to give a bit more realism to the part. I'll give it a bit of a clean up first. The main preparation is to get rid of the mould seam all the way around. It will spoil the appearance if we don't do that. And then finally I want to drill the tops out at least. I'm not going to bother with the bottoms, you can't really see that. So first I just want to centre mark the plastic. It's easy for the drill to stray off, so I always centre punch before drilling. Just make sure the drill doesn't wander around. I'll just deepen them a little bit with a 0.5 bit. And then I'll make the actual opening with a 1mm. So that's much improved by that simple bit of refinement. It's a much better part to fit onto the model. So that's this week's work. Not too much to look at, but as I said at the beginning, it's a bit of a short week. So I'll just get those over to the spray booth to get them primed. Then I'll put a coat of white on the lantern and we'll see if we can do the glazing. Okay, see if we can do some glazing on this lantern. I'm not absolutely convinced it'll work, but we'll give it a go. So this is micro crystal clear. Well, so far so good. When I'm glazing a set of windows like this, I never do them consecutively, and that's because if I put some more crystal clear into this next window aperture, it could draw the crystal clear out of the one that I've already done. So give it some space and do the alternate one. These are actually glazing fine, and it's because they're narrow, although they're quite tall windows. They're very narrow, so the crystal clear has something to grip onto. Sometimes the crystal clear will pop out again. You just have to do them again if that happens. So that's half glazed. I'll leave that to dry for a bit, then come back and do the other windows. Whilst I'm waiting for the crystal clear to dry, I'll fit the radar in place. The galley flue will eventually fit here on this midships deck, and it attaches onto the funnel side like that. I'm not going to fit that at the moment though. It's needs a little bit of weathering and a bit more detail on it. So I'm going to wait and fit that a bit later on. Just having a look at the lantern, which has now dried, the crystal clear in the openings that I applied earlier on. That's dried and it's come out pretty good. That's a bit better than the Revell plastic, which we would have to paint all the frames in the transparency. So I think that's probably just an easier way to do things. I think it's probably also a neater result than using acetate sheet in those. At least the glass, if that's what you want to call it, appears to be flush with the frames. So I'm pretty happy with that. That can go on. Just some medium super glue on that. It's all good. One thing I'd forgotten to do is put the ladder on the mast, so I'll just put that right now. So we fitted a bracket for this ladder, or a little hook bracket, right at the top of the mast. So we want to hook the top onto that first of all. And then we have some more attachment points down at the bottom, some little stays. I've actually broken one off. I'll have to try and replace that. So fitting a part like that just makes me think really about the crew of these ships and the conditions that they worked in. I can't imagine climbing up that ladder in the freezing cold and ice of the North Atlantic to either go work on the rig at the top of the mast or to get into that lookout for your hour or so of duty, if that's how long you could manage up there. They're brave men. As I said, I'm not going to fit the mast just now. I'll just position it for the photographs at the end of the video. Okay, a little bit more done this week. Not as much as I'd hoped to do. And we will be stretching beyond 20 episodes, obviously, to finish the model off. For the next episode, I just need to check what I need to do around the mast, just to make sure that I can fit the mast and get the rigging in without any problems. I don't want to be doing the rig and then finding out that I've got all the detailing to build around it. So that'll be the first check I do next time. And if it's clear, I'll start on doing some of the rigging, I think. Then it's on the running with the rest of the detail parts. There's still quite a few photo etch parts from the Pontos set. There's one or two pieces of turn brass as well for the ensign staff, for example. But in the main, it's tiny little bits and pieces to do just to finish this one off. So, cold permitting, I'll be doing some more work over the next week, and we'll see how far we can get. It'd be nice to get this finished in the next episode. We'll see how we go with that. But however far we get, I'll be back with you next Friday at 8 o'clock for the next part of this Corvette build. I might also just get a quick video in for the next part of the Mosquito build. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to be going with that for the next stage of the build, but we'll take a look at what we need to do next on that build as well. The pair of Mustangs that you can see behind me are for the Aces series, and the second one that I'm building to catch up on the lost video footage, that's nearly there now. It's nearly at the stage that I got to with the first one when that footage disappeared, unfortunately. So back on track with the Mustang, and plenty going on at the minute, as you can see in the shed. So hopefully I'll see you before next Friday, but if not, the next Corvette build next Friday, 8 o'clock. See you then. Bye for now.